Over the years, I've collected quite a few rings from mostly gold to some rose gold and silver. And today I'm going to share with you the lessons and tips that I have learned to actually put together a wearable but cute ring stack. So the first lesson that I learned is you should always go for stacking and daintier pieces before buying too many statement pieces. And that was the mistake that I made when I first started buying jewelry. I was very drawn to the statement pieces, like super thick rings and things with embellishments and all sorts of colors. The rationale behind it was if I'm wearing a jewelry, I better make sure everybody can see it, and I better make sure the jewelry makes an impact in my wardrobe. So I went into looking for these super hard to style statement rings that may or may not go with any of the outfits that I own. But only until when I actually studied how other people stack their rings, looked at a bunch of inspiration pictures, did I realize that the sophisticated ring stacks are actually comprised of really simple and just thin and dainty pieces. Now, I will put a disclaimer that if you just love the look of chunkier and more statementy rings, then you do whatever that makes you comfortable and happy. But I think for me, what's more wearable and more easily styled are actually really thin pieces. And don't underestimate the power of dainty jewelry. Even though they're dainty and you would think they're hardly noticeable, they together make a great impact. So let's just use my right hand as an example. I'm going to take all of the rings off just to show you how my hand will look over time as I layer on more pieces. So this is just bare hand. And I'm going to first start off with a couple of these dainty pieces. So I like to put a really thin but with a little bit of design detail one on my thumb. And then I typically also just do one on my index finger. So even with just these couple of daintier rings, it still makes an impact. It makes your hand just look a bit, I don't know, more interesting and also more elegant. I really like the look of these daintier rings. And if you want to do a fully dainty ring look, you can definitely do so. I don't typically like to just wear them on all of my fingers. I like to leave at least one gap. And this is a little tip here. Let me just show you the difference. I mean, it's fine, but it's also like, see, there's a straight line that almost looks like your hand is cut into the top half and the bottom half. And that's not really the look that I am going for. So by leaving a gap, I mean removing at least one ring from your 5 fingers so that there is a gap, especially for my index and the ring finger. I typically like to either go for something like this, or I like to go for something like my middle finger, ring finger, and maybe thumb. What you can also do is to stack your layering rings. So for example, here I have a thinner one, a slightly thicker layer one. Once I stack it, it almost looks like a statement ring. That brings us to the next tip, which is to stack your thinner rings to create that statement effect. And that is just the best, more versatile usage of your layering rings. So just to show you an example, I'm going to put this gold ring here, very simple, not much design detail. When I want to create a statement effect, I like to have something that's a little bit more sparkling. So I'm going to layer this second piece here. And then I also want to play with texture, so different kind of ring designs. So this is another great example. It almost looks like a chain. And by layering that on, see how instantly you have this thicker, more statement-y ring effect. Sometimes if I want to go really crazy, what I will do is I will stack the shinier pieces in between the more like gold colored pieces. So for example, I have these 3 rings here, and then I'm gonna put on this Amazon Diamante ring and then close it off with another gold ring. So now this looks like a very much statement ring that you could buy, you know, by itself, but it's really just made of 5 different layering rings. And if I'm wearing something like this, I just like to leave my hand bare. Just simple as this. The third tip is to understand the metals and the material of the rings, and especially pairing that with your lifestyle and preferences. So let's use the gold family as an example. There is your brass rings that look like gold rings but are made of brass, which means they may tarnish more easily, they look more dull, they give you that, you know, brassy finish, not as shiny as gold. But you can go for the gold plated ring, which is a very thin layer of gold on top of other alloy that comprise of the base of your ring. And then next layer up is gold vermeil, which is just a much thicker layer of still gold plated, which means it'll last a bit longer. It's typically a bit more affordable than the solid gold rings, which is the ultimate if you are someone who don't want to take your rings off ever and you want to shower with it, you want to go to your gym with these rings, I would recommend solid gold. Even within solid gold, there are different kinds like 18K gold, 14K gold, 10K gold. Essentially, the higher the number, it has more percentage of real gold. And real gold, if you don't know, is not as hard as some of the other metals. Depending on your need and also depending on your color preference, the higher the number is, the more yellow that gold piece will become. Same thing with silver. There are silver jewelry that are not made of silver, and they actually, in my opinion, I prefer that kind of silver because it doesn't oxidize. Versus if you get something like a sterling silver piece, over time your ring may, you know, look dull, may turn black. You will need to polish it once in a while. This is an example. If you can see at the corners here, this is a Monica Vinader ring, super pretty with these tiny diamonds. But if you wear this, let's say in the shower, like sweat in this, over time you just need to polish these a bit more. So there are a lot of detail in actually choosing the material of rings and just jewelry overall, and I'm happy to do a separate video on that if you just want to learn a bit more. But coming back to this tip, it's really important to ask yourself, do you like to take your rings off? Or do you require your rings to stay on all the time? And that will determine the material of the rings and the budget. And that actually affects how you stack your rings, because ultimately we don't have unlimited supply of whatever rings we want to stack. I think for me, because I like more complicated looks, I would rather spend not as much on every single ring, but have a lot of rings, so I have different options to create different stacking looks. Versus if you are someone who just wants to have one stacking look and call it a day and don't ever change up, or don't want to change up your ring stacks quite often, then you might want to invest in more expensive rings, because they will carry you day after day and they will not be worn as easily as some of the gold plated ones. The fourth tip is finally bringing in statement rings, and the tip here is to not go too crazy, especially when you're not sure if that stack will look nice. When I'm putting together a ring stack that involves a statement ring, I would always do that statement ring first. So An example over here, I have my engagement ring, well, my temporary engagement ring here. We actually got this from Amazon and I really like the style of this. I will try to pull pieces that are kind of matching or speaking to this statement piece. So in this case, it is kind of diamante with gold detail. So I'm going to pull another gold ring. And in this case, I'm just putting this very dainty stacking ring here. The problem is now it kind of looks a little bit imbalanced, like this is just too big and this is too small. So sometimes what I like to do is to stack a couple of really thin and dainty pieces just to balance the look out a little bit. And then in this case, I also really like to have something on my thumb. So I'm gonna put a thumb ring here, just so, again, I want to create a look that is balanced. If you have something that looks and feels heavy on one end, I typically like to balance a few more daintier layering pieces on the other end. Last tip is when it comes to pairing statement rings together, you need to make sure that there is at least one element that is coherent. So let me just use another ring as an example. This guy from also Monica Vinegar. It is a sterling silver ring and it is quite chunky. Now I could just leave it like that. I think this is a really cool look in and of itself. But if you want to kind of stack your hand up a bit, I would go for something that has also silvery elements. So this one has diamonds over, even though the band is yellow. I actually sometimes like the mixed metal look, but when you just look at my hand, it's not that easy to tell that this ring has gold in it. So this is the starting point. I could also stack another thinner band, again a diamante band from Amazon I believe, to make the statement ring even more statementy. So now that the diamante bit and the silvery color is pairing very well with my diamond pave ring over here. And if I want to, I can go even more wild by stacking another silvery ring here. This is not a silver or sterling silver ring, so you do see the color difference. I'm typically fine with the color difference. Another example is this pearly ring that is very much statementy. I did also mention this in my everyday jewelry collection. But something like this will not go well with the ring over there. You kind of just want this ring to do the talking, but if you want to stack up a bit more, I would just go for something that is super simple, maybe like this gold ring on the thumb. That could be a cool look. And maybe a pinky ring over here. But if I do a pinky ring, I probably take my thumb ring off. And also don't forget, you have the rest of your jewelry too. So today I'm wearing pearl earrings. I think if I just pair it with this pearl ring, it'll go really well. And then my necklace over here match with the gold color of my pinky ring. So this is very much a coherent look already. And in my experience, it is definitely easier to just pair rings of the same material or same color or same similar design. But as you get more and more into stacking rings, it is actually quite fun to literally just pull all of your rings out and play around with what kind of looks you can put together. Let me know in the comments down below which one is your favorite tip from today, and if you have any other questions about styling rings or styling jewelries overall. I am definitely planning to do more jewelry related videos this year, and I hope to see you in one of these ones. Bye!